Hey, Andy.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Marie.
Hi.
Hey.
Hiya.
All right. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Yeah. How's it going so far? How's the conversation and how's the event so far?
I think it's been pretty cool to see because a couple of big takeaways that I wanted from this conference were like, this open forum session and the fact that we need to talk about this. This is important, as well as mental health awareness. And this morning was the keynote speaker, Dr. Christine Dunleavy at Conestoga, and this session now. But a lot of sessions have already started to touch on all of this and have mentioned it in breakout sessions, in other addresses. It's not the first time people should be hearing about this if they've been a part of the conversation for the last day and a half. So that's been hopeful.
That's good. I like everyone's I Heart PACAC. That's really good. Drop that. I like that. That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. So I, like I said, I just kind of went through my slides again, and I'm going to use those black at as the conversation starting point, and just kind of go through some of those slides and say, this is what our students were saying. Our students are alum, that most of these are specific to your college counseling office, but that doesn't mean that, admissions offices have plenty to learn from this as well. So I was going to go through those and then give some discussion questions related to that, and then toss it, say, we're going to break out into rooms, and if someone could have, a note taker and report out, like, here are some questions to explore.
Yeah.
And certainly not all of them, but whatever spoke the most to you.
So Mary is going to start the session and welcome everyone back in. We have one award, the PACAC Partner in Education Award, that we're going to start with, because the opening keynote session, we ended with an award, and I felt like we had to rush things to then get to this award before we had to go to the next thing. So we want to do this and then let everything kind of keep flowing naturally, so that we don't want to cut anyone off. So that will all happen pretty quickly at the very start. And then I'm going to welcome you, and then you can take it away.
Okay. Cool. And so we need to finish by 12:25, right?
Yeah, until 12:30. Yeah. Okay. And Andy, we're going to be using breakout rooms for this session.
Yes, I had a question about that. So is there like any type of preference in terms of randomization? Do we want to allow people to elect rooms?
No.
How many rooms?
How large of a group do you think, Marie? What would you recommend?
I don't want it to be difficult. I think when I've done this talk, this is the third time I've done this talk, I found that like groups of like up to 10 seem to be good. After that, it gets a little noisy, but I defer to you all.
Okay, so we can see how many people join the session at the start, and then.
Is the goal just to have smaller discussion groups and just at random?
Yeah.
So there doesn't need to be like a specific moderator placed in each of the rooms or anything like that. Cool. Yeah, that should be easy enough.
It's simple.
Yeah, it's super simple. So yeah, we can shoot for under 10. The number of rooms will kind of vary on what our attendance looks like. But,
perfect. Thank you, Andy.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yay. It's so good to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I'm honored. Thank you.
I think the last time we met in person was when, I think it might have been Ian Harkness was president.
Yeah. And
I think you were our board.
I was. Oh my gosh.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
How many years ago was that?
Girl, at least 4, 5 maybe.
4.
And it was, I had this like terrible stint that was limited strangely just to my board time, where not a single flight I took off on time or landed on time or in the correct city. Correct city became an issue as well. And so I was a day late for you all.
I remember that. You poor thing. You came, I think we handed you a drink.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Like it became like a joke on the NACAC board that I was known as the late Marie Bigham. And every single time it was a flight issue. One time I had an ear infection and got off the plane and saw like first aid in the airport. And they're like, oh, we can't medically let you get on a plane. Your eardrum will pop. And I'm like,
What?
Oh my God.
how is this a thing? And then my board term ended and haven't had problems since. Knock on wood. But yeah, you guys throw a great party. Like you guys throw a really, really, really great event, and that was fun.
We're really missing that last night. That's for sure.
Sure.
A good social hour and a half with different events. Taylor, a great, hour and a half session, but we were missing the in-person. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, how are groups like pulling off or doing that social thing?
So last night we offered a yoga class.
I saw that, yeah.
It's something a little different. Bingo, which was the highest attended just by a little bit. And then a happy hour that was kind of a free for all, like sharing stories and discussing like whatever they wanted to. So we started in a room, did 3 breakout rooms, and just had people say like, hey, put a 1 before your name if you want to join yoga, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's fun. A very close friend of mine owns a large event planning company. Like he does like Super Bowl halftime shows.
Oh my gosh.
Big events. And so, all of his work has, for the most part, disappeared. He, a couple of years ago, started dipping his toe into online virtual events and now is really trying to figure that out for his clients. But he's like, it's the social part. It's that social part. Because I not jokingly asked him, I'm like, I go to these things to sit at the bar and see who's walking by and grab conversations. Like, that's pretty much what I'm doing now. And Sam was like, yeah, that's the one thing we can't figure out how to do. Those hallway conversations as me at the bars. He's like, that's hard.
Yeah.
So,
I don't see yet, but Taylor, Misty knows she's going first, right?
And you're shaking your head, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was emailing her and Will actually. It's not a surprise, but just that was the only way we were gonna get him to come. And they both know that like they're at like 11:02 or 11:30, 11:32. Like they both, yeah.
sure.
Awesome.
Cool. And I have the slideshow ready to share, Mary. We'll get started.
Perfect.
As soon as people come in the room, we can share it.
Thank you for the last minute changes.
Do you need me or someone to stay in the room? Like, I don't know if Taylor, you want to be able to be part of one of these discussions. Like, do you need someone?
Oh, I do. Yeah. Andy,
like, I can stay and just like say hello, and then we can put them in a random room.
I mean, I can certainly take care of that as well if you want to.
Yeah, I think if Andy's okay, not being a part of these conversations, I definitely want to be placed in a room. I hope we all are. Marie, would you like to go into a room, or are you?
I tend to just like pop in and out of rooms.
Cool. So Andy, would you be able to help Marie with that aspect of it if she needs it? Or
So I'm fairly certain. So I'll assign her at random to one of the rooms initially,
There's Missy.
as everyone else will be. But I'm pretty sure because she's a co-host, just as you are, you guys can, I think, pop around. So like when you click on the breakout room button, I think it lets you just like choose whichever room. There's probably no options right now because there's no rooms created, but as soon as that option is created, then you should be able to kind of freely drop in and out.
Perfect.
thank you.
I got this. Misty, how are you getting Will here?
Hey, Mary.
Huh?
Say that, ask the question again.
How are you getting Will here?
I just asked him. It was last minute, to be very honest with you. Andrea really helped me out. Go Andrea all the time. Saves you your butt every time. And he responded right away. I actually had to disclose why I was reaching out because we're not close friends. And it would be weird. It's like, why do you want me to come to this session? So I felt like it was best to just say, look, I've nominated you for this award and we'd love for you to be there. And he was so gracious. He's such a nice guy. So he said, of course. You know, he has his dad, and he's got his dad's schedule. So he was like, okay, it's going to be between nap time and lunchtime.
Right.
So yeah, I had to, you know, I couldn't think of any other nuanced way to get him here.
I know the feeling. I was racking my brains how to get Daryl in the room the other day.
Right. Well, you guys are colleagues, so, you know.
Well, I said to him, I said, Daryl, I'm really nervous about the membership meeting. Can you do me a favor? And can we schedule a review? Can you stay on from beginning to end? And then we'll debrief the next day.
That's funny.
Aw.
So we have it scheduled. Have a debrief tomorrow. I haven't told him yet that was the reason for it.
That's so funny.
I like that.
I figured it out by now.
I think because it was so last minute, I felt like, you know, I just need to let him know what's happening. I
And
think
if
I
he
would
wouldn't normally come to conference either, you know, given his
Right.
new role.
Right.
Yeah, he's a
It
dad.
makes it harder.
Yeah. And he's a professor he's an adjunct professor at,
Villanova.
That happens.
A couple of years ago,
I'm gonna go upstairs to where maybe we won't have a dog barking.
We love dogs here at PACAC.
okay.
And
Dogs,
kids,
young
different,
children.
so all great.
You guys know I'm
Cats,
at,
plants.
at the beach.
Oh,
Yeah.
unfair.
So
Nice.
I think that works.
Oh, yeah, that's nice.
Cool, the number's ticking up. 70. How many more?
This is gonna be
I
a very
keep-
great session. Good active session, I think.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
keep looking for Will. Will's name.
A couple of years ago, I won one of the PACAC awards, and it was here in New Orleans. So I had like people crashing in my house, and we were day drinking. And I was like, I'm not going to the conference today. And people Steve Rappier kept texting me, when are you showing up for lunch? I'm like, I'm not going to lunch. And he's like, you need to come to lunch. I'm like, I'm going to take people out to lunch. And he's like, you're getting an award in 15 minutes. You need to be here.
Steve.
Oh my God. I was like in jammies. Like it was bad. It was real bad. And after that, I was like, I need people to tell me when I have to be at places. Like you can't be subtle. Because I'm
Will's
like,
there. I
All
see
right.
him.
We're at 95 and 11:30.
We're good.
all right.
Open up. All right.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. We'll give it another minute as the waiting room gets cleared out. Okay, it is 11:31 and we will go ahead and get started as folks are coming in. Welcome back and welcome to our open forum discussion. I am really excited to see so many of you joining this important conversation. We're up to about 125 participants so far, which is wonderful. But to kick things off, what better time but to start with an award, especially this particular award. So the Partner in Education Award. The PACAC Partner in Education Award was created in '98 to enhance awareness about our association by recognizing someone outside the membership for outstanding contribution to and support of post-secondary education. This award represents the collaborative spirit needed to foster a commitment to educational equity and access for all. Individuals, institutions, and organizations may be nominated to receive this award. With that being said, I would like to call on our past president, Misty Whalen from Harriton High School, to offer the award nomination.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. I am so honored to present this award today. The recipient's work I have admired a long time. He and I share a passion for secondary school counselors for sure. And I think the passion really focused on that public school counselors really can be and should be experts in college counseling, along with all of their other clinical work that they do with school counseling. And he's really moved the needle forward quite a bit, or the notch forward quite a bit, and I'm just so impressed with his work. Over the years, I've known him to be a tireless advocate for school counselors. He has worked to implement significant change in academia to ensure that public school counselors have the option to take graduate level coursework in college counseling. He utilized his expertise as Director of College Counseling at Salesianum and his network of colleagues in PACAC to shine a light on this deficit and brought the discussion forward through conference workshops, standing committees, and to the graduate programs themselves. Will has been an essential voice raising the concern that high school counselors often enter the field with minimal experience in college counseling, and a huge advocate that it become an essential aspect of a secondary school counselor's certification. Will developed coursework with scope and sequence, and along with colleagues proposed graduate level workshops, visiting lecturers, and ultimately coursework with that a university could offer to its graduate students. Will has truly fought the good fight and never gave up. He remained committed to the end goal of convincing established graduate programs to include college counseling coursework in the secondary education track. Will is now an adjunct professor in Villanova's College of Education and Human Services and is helping to launch the new track in their well-known counselor education program. Will is a trailblazer, a super dad, his current and most noble full-time profession, and has worked in tandem with PACAC officers, committee members, and colleagues for years to improve the education of secondary school counselors across the Commonwealth. And I am honored to announce Will Yarnell as the recipient of the PACAC Partner in Education Award. Congratulations, Will.
Hello, thank you. Can everybody hear me? I hope so.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate this award. You know, we've been working hard on it for a long time, and you know, we're going to continue to work hard on it. And I actually start teaching my class for the summer on college counseling next Tuesday. So if anybody's interested in ever helping out with a class, feel free to drop me an email. Sometimes it's cool to have everybody, you know, pitch in. The students love it. And as Misty mentioned, next year, Villanova is going to start a certificate program in college counseling, postmaster's certificate for school counselors. So I very much appreciate, you know, the honor, and I very much look forward to working with you as we start this program and get more people involved, and hopefully we can get a lot of PACAC people on our teaching docket to help us out and keep things moving forward. Hopefully a lot of other colleges will see what we're doing at Villanova, and they'll jump on it as well. And hopefully the state of Pennsylvania will have more education in relation to this topic. So thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Will. That's wonderful. And we miss you in the state, in PACAC as well. But congratulations on such a well-deserved award. And what a perfect time to have that partner in education conversation. We're actually going to get started with a really, and I shouldn't say get started, we've been in this conversation. Many of us have been, this is a conversation we've been having all of our lives. And I am so excited that we have Marie Bigham joining us from Accept, who I shared with Marie. I recall meeting her at prior PACAC conference when she was on the NACAC board. So I am so excited that she is rejoining our PACAC conference to introduce this important topic of discussion. But I'll turn it over to Taylor to talk about how this will go.
Oh, Mary, you do a great job as it is. I've been talking plenty over this virtual conference, so I'm not going to take much, but I am thrilled that Marie has agreed and the Accept organization has agreed to help facilitate this conversation for us surrounding anti-racism work that we should be doing, that we should be aware of, how to make this work that we do more equitable, bring justice to what we do. So I'm very proud that we're having this conversation. Thank you so much, Marie. Marie brings so much experience and professional service to this profession, to this conversation. So I will turn it over to you, and I will stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours.
Thanks, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I have to apologize for my hair and the fact that I will be fidgety. It is a typical New Orleans day, over 90 and humidity around the same, which I love truly, but just means my hair is getting bigger and bigger. So I apologize, and I'm really honored. And like Mary said, last time I was with PACAC as a group was when I served on the NACAC board. I believe, like you said, it was Ian's time when he was president. And I was able to come join, and I don't know if Daryl Jones wants the credit or the blame for this, but it was at the PACAC conference where I had kind of a change of heart in how I use my microphone and my position of privilege. I believe that was the year that you all had Wes Moore speaking as your keynote, yeah. And there was a lot of conversation about Wes and what he was saying, and it was, as is now, an incredibly difficult time in our work and in our profession around race, and really hard conversations about race and our role in that. And so I pulled Daryl Jones aside and said, hey, I have this script from NACAC, but I feel like there are more important things to say right now, and is that okay? Should I do that? And Daryl gave me the thumbs up and helped me really think about that, and that was a real turning point for me. So thank you, Daryl, and thank you, PACAC, for that opportunity. And before I get started, I wanted to acknowledge that as I am here in Louisiana and New Orleans, that I am in the city of New Orleans, but truly on the unceded territorial lands of the Choctaw and of the Houma Indians, that all of us sit on unceded territorial lands of Indigenous people. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that and to consider in our work what we consider home and what is home to many. So thank you for that opportunity. I'm going to share my screen in a second, but I want to talk a little bit today about what I hope to accomplish, and that's a big conversation about race and admissions. Easy stuff. Really, what I want to talk about today, though, is how race impacts our work in ways that we may or may not acknowledge. We always have rules of engagement whenever we have conversations, and so I just leave this here. Speak from the I perspective, lean into the discomfort, suspend your judgment. But we're going to have, after I kind of go through some slides, we're going to break up into smaller groups and chat about some of the ideas that I'm going to share, and hopefully we can dig into some of those things together. I want to examine our practices as college admissions professionals. And how what we think of as standard practice, good counseling, good recruiting, can be really harmful for students of color, particularly for our Black and Brown students. So that's what we're going to dive into today. And I also want to start by acknowledging that this is not a comfortable conversation for us to dig into. It's just not. As I share some of these slides, I'm going to be very honest and vulnerable with you and point out the times where I thought to myself, wow, that's me. So I just want to acknowledge at first, like, we're going to have moments of discomfort here together. But again, this is not a judgmental moment. This is an opportunity for us to step back and say, how do I not do that again? How do I affirm students differently and better? So that's kind of the gist of what we're going to do. So if you've not, I'm going to introduce you to a whole movement that's occurring mostly on Instagram, but elsewhere, other social media as well. And it's a whole group of student and alumni-led social media accounts called Black At. And if you type in, you'll see just that, Black At, different things, and you'll see different school names pop up. This started as a movement among independent school students, but has really grown beyond that now. Many of the slides I'm going to use today are from independent schools, but they are universal. These are slides that could be said about any of our institutions, that any of our alumni, any of our current students could be saying. So I just want to start by saying I'm not actually in the beginning going to show the names attached to these schools, not because I'm trying to protect people, but rather because I want to demonstrate the universality of these conversations. And at the end, I'll have slides that'll show you where these came from. But students, high school students especially, and the alum are really taking to social media to talk about these bigger issues that our institutions wrestle with. What was most shocking to me at first, and then not at all, then became frightening to me as I was putting these together and looking at these different, say hi to my husband, and looking at these different accounts, is that college admissions, the process, the working with counselors, what happens when decisions come out, how people are treated. College admissions, for almost all of these accounts that I've looked at, and I've seen now close to 75 of them, college is first. This is a big deal. And for students who are Black and brown, especially our Black students who are at these schools, how the college process plays out is a really hurtful and harmful experience for our students. And some of these things I knew in my core and had experienced myself when I was a student of color in a private school. But some of these, like I said, really punched me in the gut. And so I want to just share some of these with you and really talk about how we can identify, does this feel racist? Or how do I step back and say, what's my own experience here? And how is this blocking my ability to see? By the way, I want to point out, sorry, let me go backwards. I want to point out that as I was putting these slides together, like I said, many of them are independent schools, but not all. And if you look broadly now, as these have been developing, but it's really across the board of education in terms of K-12, whichever sector they're in. All of those things are pretty universal. But something else I really want to point out, because I do live in the South, when these conversations first started, there was a sense of, oh, well, that happens in the South. The South is a racist place. I want to point out that virtually every slide I'm going to show is from a school that is in the Northeast or in the West Coast. Later, you'll see in some of the resources I use that the schools are from all over the country. But I caution that as someone who is a Midwesterner by birth and lived in the Northeast for a long time, that we tend to have this idea in the country that racism is focused in a certain region of the country. It's not. This one was a gut punch, right? In 6th grade, they took our whole grade to an overnight trip where they just run through the woods and pretend we were slaves being chased by slave runners. Clearly racist. That I think pretty much anyone can look at and say, yeah, that was wrong in every possible way. Again, I want to point out this is not a school that's in the region that many would suggest. This is a school in the Northeast. That's not hard to see. And yet, I need to also be really honest, this exercise, chasing children through the woods at night and calling it, we're chasing down escaped slave people, was not an uncommon practice apparently. And several of the school accounts mention this. We can all agree, that's racist. Now let's look at some of these other slides. This really speaks to how students of color, particularly Black students, are treated in school discipline. And how, and this is again specific a little bit to independent school world, but not really, how money can get you out of those things and how discipline is meted out in schools in very, very different ways. We see that colleges are becoming more and more aware with the get rid of the box and those different movements. But it's important for us to recognize that our alum and our current students are saying there's a dramatic difference, that students of color walk on eggshells, whereas wealthy kids and white kids, kids of privilege, don't even consider this an issue in their schools. They know they'll get away with things. What about this? Here we have a student who had a really negative experience with an interviewer at their dream school, a racialized negative experience. When they reported to their college counselor, it was kind of shrugged off. again, I think a moment that many of us like to believe, I like to believe that I am a good counselor, that I would have heard this, I would have done something. And I also need to acknowledge that there are moments where kids would come into my office and tell me something big and important, and I would be distracted by something else. I would be not understanding what they were saying. I wouldn't take their concerns seriously. So this student then has experienced twice the trauma of this really negative experience. Again, we can look at that and say, okay, I can see that's racist action. Then what about this? And I'll give you a moment to read. But the gist of this is students of color, Black students particularly, feeling that their counselors never believed in them, that their counselors told them, this list isn't okay, this is too reachy, you aren't Ivy material. Why is that? I will admit, it was when I got to these slides, these Insta posts where students were talking about their list and feeling that they were being undervalued, where I had my first moment of defense, where I immediately, to my husband's surprise, shouted at my computer apropos of nothing. We were just trying to give you good counseling. Some places are preachy, blah, blah. As I sat with my own words, the next thing that came out of my mouth was, yes, I might say to all kinds of students, college X is of so much of a reach, but for white students, students of wealth, students who have significant privilege, they might hear that from me, and that might be one of the first times in their lives that they've been told, hey, you might not be good enough for this. For Black students, for brown students, for kids of color, every day that they're in our schools, someone is telling them, you aren't good enough for this. So that student gets to us at the end of their high school experience or towards the end, the culmination of their hard work, and we add to that pile on, you aren't good enough. Another moment where, again, I shouted into the ether, but I swear I was just trying to be a good counselor. No. Here we have two slides where a Black student believes that every conversation with their counselor has been driven by financial aid. These students believe and have taken away that the only thing that their counselor sees them as is someone who needs aid. We don't see them as the whole person, or listen even. Slide where the student says, my counselor wanted me to talk about race even though I didn't want to. How many times have we had those conversations to say, telling us your story is important. What about this story? Have you thought about this? And I then turn it to you to ask yourself, how many times have you said to white students, it's really important that you write about your racialized experience? Because I'll be honest with you, as I thought about this in the 20 some odd years I did college counseling before leaving, I can't recall once where I said to a white student, it's really important you write your essay about your racialized experience. And I thought I was being a good counselor. That is not how the students receiving this information. I know that this was one that I really had to sit with. Here we have students who are saying, I wanted to look at HBCU, and my counselor didn't know enough about it. Or if they did, they only knew one or two. How much do we know about minority serving institutions? How much do we know about HBCUs and the difference between HBCUs and Black serving institutions? How much do we think we know, and how much do we take as conventional wisdom? I can hear myself saying to a student without stopping and thinking, well, you know, HBCUs are great. However, they don't give very good financial aid and the graduation rates are terrible. Well, I just repeated those things. If those were things that I had always been told and trained and taught, but did I know that for sure? Did I know that from experience? Did I know that from visiting? Did I have the relationships that I had worked so hard to build with counselors at other institutions? Did I have those with our reps at minority serving institutions? The answer was absolutely not. My last couple of years as a counselor, my students pushed me to learn far more about minority serving institutions. In the last 3 years of counseling, that became something I really desperately needed to know more about, wanted to know more about. It's something that we should all know better. And to not make assumptions about whether a student should or shouldn't be there, but to give them that as, here's an option for your education. I don't know about you, but for me, as a college counselor, April was one of the hardest times. December and April, when decisions came out, were some of the hardest times, and not because I knew people in general would be disappointed, but I knew how receipt of these decisions would hit our Black and brown students hardest and the most. And it was always the same story. You only got in because. You only got in because. As I was thinking about these slides and seeing these stories repeated over and over again, the first question I asked myself was, let me take that back. My first comment in defense was, oh my gosh, it's so true, and yet what can I do to fix the school culture? How can I do that? Which then became a conversation with myself of, here are all the actions that I could have taken at these institutions to do something to repair the school culture. And we know that these comments about who gets in and you know why happen from the very, very top to the youngest students. I can recall several times saying to my bosses, the principals, the superintendent, parents, faculty, you don't know why someone got in. You weren't the committee, you weren't there. But it's something that I feel at this moment I didn't fight enough, and I didn't fight that culture enough for my students. And it makes me really sad because I know a lot of those students really wanted to approach this process with happiness and celebration, and yet acknowledge that there was deep fear of what might or might not happen. And I think about this one a lot. On one hand, we have a Black alum and parent who is really questioning why they would send their children to predominantly white institutions, to prestigious institutions, because of their own personal experience. And then the other is a comment from a white student pointing out that in high school, another white student said something pretty racist and ugly that the teacher nodded along, didn't correct. And now that person is engaged in national politics. So what we do really, really matters, because the damage that is caused is lifelong. Sometimes in a very personal way, and sometimes, frankly, in a systemic, very different way. And something that we do in higher ed is that we are very proud to proclaim that we train the leaders of the future. If we want to hold on to that, if we want to keep claiming proudly, we train the leaders of our future, then we must do better. We must do better, because what we have done to these leaders of the future is either destroyed the confidence, kept them from connecting to our institutions because of such bad experiences, or we've launched these people into positions of national power where these unchecked biases and racial expressions continue. This is why this is important. There are lots of reasons why this is important, but our work has long-lasting impact. Like I said, I took the names off of those slides because I thought it was really important for us to acknowledge that these things are universal, but I want to also thank quickly the folks, the students, the alum, the faculty, the parents who participate in these conversations, because their stories all inform this extremely. And I would encourage you to take a look at these accounts. I would encourage you to go to Instagram and type in Black at and look at your school name, see if it's there. And to really read these, to really think about what we do in our work that has caused such harm to our Black and brown students and our students of color. I walked away from reading those slides, and as I continue to, by saying our standard practices, what we do in the work of college admissions, it hurts our students of color. That we have really got to stop and rethink and say, what are we doing and why? And so I offer these questions, pardon me, I offer these questions because we're going to break into discussion groups for the next 15 to 20 minutes, 15. And I offer these to say, how can we take these thoughts that these alum and students have shared with us and really dive into it, dive into our responsibility. And I'll put these questions into both the chat box and into the breakout thing so that you all can play with them. But just to point these out, how responsible are we for the culture of college admissions in our schools? And college reps, like, you're part of that too. How are we all responsible for that? When we're working with students, what kind of assumptions do we make with regards to ability to pay? In our meetings and the materials that are being sent, in our conversations, what assumptions are we making? This one hit me. When we talk about college list and we say, this is a reach, this is, you know, what I see is possible. When we talk with students and we say, you know, 8 to 10 is manageable, let's really think about that. Who are we protecting and why? If a student says, I want to apply to all these, I'm willing to take the risk, why are we saying maybe not? Are we protecting our secondary schools, institutions, and that perceived reputation? Are we protecting colleges, saying, oh, we don't want you to read too much? Are we making decisions that we say are on behalf of the students, but really are in protection of other institutions that aren't the student? And how are we harming them with that? And again, the question that I've been really wrestling with, if we train the leaders of our future, what's our actual responsibility then to the future? So with that, I'm gonna say, let's break into these groups. I would ask each group, we're trying to keep it pretty small so you can have good conversations. If you all could have someone who take notes and perhaps reports out, that would be great. And I'm gonna post these questions into the chat and into the breakout room boxes, so just to have them available. All right, let's do this.
Great. I think Andy should be creating our breakout rooms now in the next minute or so. We have 155 participants. I hope everyone will stick around. This conversation is important. So we'll break into groups of hopefully about 10 or fewer people, and then come back together at the end and share out.
Hey, everyone. Looks like we're close to having everyone back. I would love some thoughts, feedback, ideas, things that came up, things you were surprised by. And I don't know the best way to manage how many people, so we'll just be about it. But thoughts and feedback, please.
Like Jeremy raised his hand. Jeremy Brandt.
Oh, okay. Jeremy, there you go. Hi.
Hi, Marie. How are you?
Hey. Good, dear. How are you?
I'm doing well. Jeremy Branch from Penn State and the next president of PACAC. And our group had some really interesting conversation that emerged. You know, we talked about some of the things that our schools have done to respond to things like the George Floyd murders and things of that nature, which was we were happy to hear, and it was helpful. But we decided, you know what, instead of talking about and lauding the things that have been done well, what are we not doing well? And what things have been allowed to exist at our colleges, our universities, our campuses that really exacerbate the problems that we've been talking about here? So one of the things we talked about was the fact that when you think about the discipline issue, right, that came up in our group and how discipline is reported, the problems that we're seeing now in terms of police brutality and the views of Black and brown people have really shown us that a lot of this exists in the soil, right? Like one of our members mentioned that at their school, when there was an issue of race that was brought up, they decided to get everybody together to talk about it. And the Black students didn't feel like it was handled well. And they mentioned that at that school, when a Black child gets upset, they are disciplined. When a white child gets upset, they are comforted. So when you look at this and you take a step back a little bit further, we see that in society, don't we? When a Black child is viewed as a threat, they are murdered. When a white child smacks police officers, maybe waves an axe, they are apprehended, right? So look at that exacerbation that exists because it really is in the soil. We also talked about the fact that higher ed often likes to fool itself into thinking that it is above the issues. And I've seen this even recently at my own campus. I serve at Penn State's Brandywine campus, and we always laud ourselves as being the second most diverse Penn State campus in the system, right? But recently, last year, we had a group of students come to us and they said, Black and brown and Latino students, and they said, we don't feel supported here. And so we're sitting here and we're saying, wait a minute, that's impossible. We're the second most diverse Penn State campus. How do you not feel supported? And you almost get on the defensive about it. But then I took a step back and I said, well, wait a minute. When you're the second most diverse place at a not that diverse institution, it doesn't mean anything, right? And so we had to scramble and put together some programming and a mentorship program that we have now in place. But that was a case of where higher ed likes to think it's above the issues. And sometimes that when you find out you're not, it creates problems. This then brought us to a conversation where somebody in the group said, well, yes, but at least those students felt like they had a space to express that, which made us think of the fact that how many students on other Penn State campuses or at other campuses in general do not express themselves, and your institution takes that as they're happy, but maybe it's that they don't feel comfortable expressing that, right? So these were just some of the larger issues that we're now kind of seeing as a group we really need to give attention to on an individual basis, in a university at large or high school at large basis, to make sure we're supporting those Black and brown students.
Thank you. That's powerful. That's a lot in 15 minutes too. That's powerful. Thank you. Let's see, who else raised their hand? Still figuring this out.
It looks like Catherine Souza did.
Okay, go for it.
Hi, everyone. Catherine Souza, Associate Director of College Counseling at Archmere Academy in Delaware, and rolling on as PDC co-chair, so professional development, something I'm really passionate about. Jeremy, kind of going off what you had said, one of the things we also talked about is, I know when I initially read the Black App posts, my assumption was that potentially these students didn't feel that they were heard. And then I had to take a moment or a space where they could feel heard. And then I had to take a step back and wonder if they had tried, and assume that rather than assuming they didn't try, maybe I should assume that they did, and they weren't listened to? And what are the things in our organizations, at our schools, in our offices that are setting up roadblocks, brushing this type of information off so that they then go to this type of opportunity? That's how they share what they need to be, kind of what needs to be said. We also talked about the lasting impact in that slide, and really thinking about that. And someone from the college side had said, or a couple people, maybe we should really be staying connected with these students a lot more, and not just the ones that come back as tour guides or panelists, but really what are their experiences on campus, so that we know kind of what we're getting students into as we're recruiting them, and potentially fighting within our own community to make sure that these students are getting the support that they need to. And then one other thing that I think was really awesome that was brought up that a lot of people could benefit from is the IDI. So it's an inventory about implicit bias. Mary Smith said that Gettysburg has been using it for training. So if you're looking for things to use with your staff in training and have conversations, that could be something to recognize that we all bring bias to the table, and how can we call it out? How can we recognize it and work to make sure that it's not coming across in our reading, in our interactions with students, or anything like that. So that's just a couple of the things we talked about.
Those are fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. The question was, can you repeat the training program? Implicit bias training, IDI, and the kind of granddaddy of them all is by Harvard. There have been some interesting.
So the IDI is actually called their Intercultural Competency. It's the Intercultural Development Inventory, IDI. I'll put a link in the chat box.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Other comments?
Looks like James Jackson has his hand raised.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm James Jackson. I'm from St. Joseph's University.
Hey.
Hi. First and foremost, I love the Facebook page. The Facebook group is where I get all my information. I get all my life. But no problem. But I think more so is about continuing the conversation when things die down. It seems like we always have these types of conversations when another Black person is killed by the police officer, or when something major as it relates to race happens. That's when we want to care. And then there's this overabundance of, oh, let's talk about race, let's talk about the inequities, and let's talk about how things need to be changed systemically. And then as soon as that kind of dies down a few more months, it's like we're back to the same pattern of, oh, racism exists. We solved it a few months ago after George Floyd got killed. And so it's like, I think it's about continuing this conversation, even when it's not popular, or when it's not the fad, or when people are, things are starting to change. Like, the only way that things can change is if this is an ongoing conversation, and it's not going to be something that at the height of something tragic happening, we talk about it. I guess if the goal is sincerely to really kind of provide equity to people of color, specifically even Black people, I think that we need to make sure that this is a conversation that continues and doesn't stop, whether people are rioting, whether police officers are killing unarmed Black men, whether there's different types of racial incidents happening in our schools. We have to continue these conversations and make sure that we have these types of forums each and every time that we have some type of professional development, or each and every time we can come together and pause.
Thanks, James.
That was exactly right. Thank you. Thank you.
And Daryl Jones also has his hand raised. Who's next?
That would be me having some manners by raising my hands. Marie, love you, by the way.
I love you.
So this is just in case one of my small group members doesn't get a chance to say it, but she brought up such a good point. Everybody got behind the Parkland protests, and people were cool with the whole, well, if you get suspended from school, or if you just don't go to school because you're having an anti-gun violence protest, that's cool. But what about the Black Lives Matter protests? Some colleges and universities said nothing about them. And will there be repercussions for people who participated in those protests who might have skipped school and done something of that sort? So that's one. And then we talked a lot about the inequities in punishment in our group. In fact, that's all we talked about because of what we already heard, the soothing of the kid of privilege who might have also had lawyers in his or her back pocket to deal with the discipline issue versus the poor kid, the black or brown kid, who automatically gets punished. So how do admissions offices deal with that, and what's our follow-up with those who either did something or didn't?
I agree with you completely. There have been some accept members who have started to really pose that question now, like as we're kind of shifting away from finishing this last class into what might be coming with this next class of pushing for statements in the same way that we did, to make sure that students who, if anything occurs to them during protests, that won't be seen as a negative. So we're kind of trying to shape some language around that right now. I'll be curious, and I've been kind of digging around for information about this. So many young students have been organizing these protests, like really taking the lead. And how do we make a statement then that's less, hey, if you've been punished, we won't care, and more, if you've been active in this way, we want to honor that. How do we highlight this? Take it less from that deficit and more from that encouragement. And I've been thinking about that and kind of talking with students who organize this, ask for their thoughts about it. I know we're over time. Can we fit in one more comment? Is that cool?
Yeah,
okay, let's do one more.
There might even be two. I'm willing.
Okay.
Everyone has to go. But Meg Ryan messaged me privately to raise her hand, so I know Meg.
Okay.
Next.
Oh, sorry. Meg Ryan from Allegheny College. I was in the group with Daryl, so that's what I was just going to reiterate the comment about the statements. And so I just kind of thought about it, and I'm thinking about why we said Black Lives Matter, but didn't come out with a formal policy that about protesting, but we did come out with a policy about protesting for Parkland. So just reiterating that and thinking about what I can do differently.
And I know my own husband in the next room over, Chris Latempa, has raised his hand. So Chris, if you want to go.
Hey everybody, Chris Latempa, Malvern Prep. Marie, first off, thank you so much for leading this discussion. I found so much of it enlightening and insightful. One of the many pieces that really struck me was conversations around race, particularly within the admission context and on an application, how we encourage students of what we'd call diverse backgrounds to talk about those backgrounds. But we don't address that typically. I know I have not personally with white students, and I work at an independent high school, very much a PWI. And I think those conversations around race, especially in largely white contexts, are sorely lacking and need to happen more so. And I love the point that you brought up. And I wonder if that's something as a profession that we can take on, and maybe making that a more prominent part of the application process and the admission process, talking about your background, your heritage, and with whiteness, all the privilege that entails. And I think certainly that would encourage more of those discussions to happen in our educational spheres. So again, that was one of the many great points that I thought were made, and something I'm looking forward to bringing to conversations with students this fall.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I believe, and I'm going to send the slides to Taylor, but if Taylor wants, y'all can happily share those, use that resource, but all that is available to you too. Should we wrap up, Taylor?
Yeah, and I know however, if there's any final comments you want to make,
yeah.
I'm so appreciative of your time, Marie, and of all of you in this session for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you. I mean, really just wrap up, just please keep these conversations going. Yeah, we're such easily distractible people, and we jump from the most interesting to the most interesting to what's shiny and new. I do that daily. However, conversations about becoming anti-racist, conversations about changing our profession and our process and our institutions, like these can't be one and done. we've been trying and Accept for 4 years, and we're ramping it up now. And our own Daryl Jones is going to be one of the hosts for a series of webinars in July. It's about ABCs of being POC in admissions. And the last one is specifically for white supervisors, how you can do better for your people of color and helping us guide us through our careers. So the conversations are going to keep going within Accept, and it's up to each of us to take them to our institutions. And I'm so humbled and grateful and so happy y'all are here. Thank you for having me. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie. And I can assure you from a PACAC perspective, this will continue going. The conversation will continue. It doesn't matter that I'm leaving the presidency after this. I know Jeremy and I have had many conversations. Justin and I, our professional development group, is right on board with this. This is a conversation that will be a part of our PACAC goals in the next year, and not just the dialogue and the conversation, but what are the action items? Because I think the dialogue and the conversation is so, so, so incredibly important, and we all get around the same page, but we need also that action. So that is a part of our conversation and a part of our action goals for the next year. And I hope that all of you will come back at 3 o'clock, because towards the end of that, Jeremy will be giving a closing remarks. And I know I won't give away his speech, but I know there will be some comments regarding all of this as well. So with that being said, Taylor, take us out.
Of course, just very briefly, before you go enjoy your lunch, I want to share the sessions for 2 o'clock. So we have 8 final educational sessions going on 2 to 2:45. I hope that you've been able to take part in the last 3, as well as all of the other sessions we've had going on. We have this session at 2, we'll wrap up from 3 to 3:30, and then we'll be done. So I hope that you all have a nice break and time away from Zoom for a little while, and I hope that we'll see you in one of the sessions at 2 o'clock. But thank you all.